Hello, you're listening to Mike Madden on the Art Show podcast. Here you will find interviews with authors, musicians, artists and anyone else in and around the arts. Some of the interviews are taken direct from the Art Show on Expat Radio, with one or two specials in between. This show features singer-songwriter Vinny Peculiar, who talks about his musical career and his charity work with Tonic Music for Mental Health. It was first broadcast on Expat Radio on Monday the 22nd of April 2019. Good evening, this is Mike Madden on the Arts Show on Expat Radio, and tonight my special guest is a guy that's not a household name, but he's from Worcestershire, a hotbed of musical talent, immortalised by a book called Get Your Kicks on the A556. So, good evening, Vinny Peculiar.
Hey Mike, good evening. It's good to be with you.
Good evening. Now, I've just mentioned Worcestershire. So were you influenced by the local bands or from those from further afield?
Well, I haven't always been based down here. I grew up in Worcestershire, in a place called Bromsgrove many years ago, and I ended up moving north for work, living in Manchester and Liverpool. So I'm sort of an honorary northerner, but just now I've been back here for maybe two or 3 years now, 2.5 years back in Worcester, where I'm living now. But I was in Manchester probably the longest time up north, maybe 22 years in Manchester and about 6 years in Liverpool. So I don't have a voice like that anymore, Mike. I try and do a local accent, but now, my voice has been somewhat northernified. But yeah, so that's. But my musical story is more about probably connections with northern musicians. Certainly, I spent a lot of the 90s in Liverpool doing a lot of recording.
So you're there's no trace of that Worcester accent anymore, and we will always welcome honorary northerners.
Yeah.
And now you joined Manchester cult label Ugly Man Records. So how did that come about?
Well, there were a few people on the kind of local songwriter scene, and the manager of Ugly Man, a chap called Guy Lovelady, became a friend of mine, and I was signed and put out my first sort of serious Vinny Peculiar album. I think I'd done a couple before that, but a record called Ironing the Soul came out in about 2001, and I suppose that was my first proper release, with reviews in mainstream music magazines and the like. Although I had a thrilling Observer review in 1997, I remember, which was great. It was a bit of a one-off, but so the name sort of started getting a little more widely known in 2001.
I've noticed that you have had some very good praise in the media, and some of them might seem like a backhanded compliment, like a warm-hearted Morrissey and the missing link between Jarvis Cocker and Roger McGough.
Yeah, it tends to land up with a sort of lyrical kind of, we like the lyrics, that's really odd but really weird. And yeah, I get those kind of comments. Some of the songs are sort of kind of linear, they tell little stories. Sometimes the stories are a little bit abstract and odd, and sometimes the stories are very true and very direct, I like to think. But who knows, the way lyrics work, there's no real rules. So
Absolutely. You describe yourself as a singer-songwriter and a poet. So have you ever found a vehicle that's purely for your poetry?
Well, I've done a poetry pamphlet, but that was many years ago. I think most of my words now either end up as songs or sort of on the back burner waiting to get a little tweak to become songs of the future or whatever. So, well, I'm a bit of a title guy. I can have a conversation with people and hang on to a phrase of theirs and turn it into something. That's kind of the way I work.
Right, well, we better be careful what we say, I guess, then.
Yeah. It'll be like a song about a radio interview.
Now, the descriptions we've just read out, the warm-hearted Morrissey, that kind of thing, it's sort of the need of the media to pigeonhole artists. So where do you see yourself in the musical landscape?
Well, I think the Vinny Peculiar stuff is slightly outside. It's very much outside the mainstream, and people discover it kind of by accident. And I suppose I see it as. I still get something out of doing it, which is kind of probably the main thing that keeps me going. I enjoy the challenge of writing songs and just the challenge of creating something that's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, and
producing a CD or an album, a vinyl album, or a collection of songs that has some kind of thread to us. I think recently, the last 2 or 3 albums, my records have been like what they used to call in the 70s concept albums. So they have like a narrative theme, and I've quite liked that with the way things have been going, and that's kind of been sort of inspirational, really.
I did see a reference to that actually, because you've produced a concept album called Silver Meadows, set in a 1980s long stay psychiatric hospital.
Sure.
Not the kind of mainstream concept that many people would come across. So what's behind that?
Well, that's really it's odd, really, because for many years I had connections in the NHS. I worked as a nurse and then in other sorts of different guises, and I finally got out of the NHS, and I was so relieved. I basically wound my time down to be part-time for like maybe 15 years, and then I finally left to do music full-time because it was then more financially viable, if you like. And the first thing I did was write a concept album about my time there, which is kind of the last thing I ever expected to do. But it sounds a little bit sociology-ish, but it's actually an album that features people that either work in or receive treatment from or are connected to this fictitious institution. And obviously some of the references are taken from my time working there. My brother had a fairly tough time. He had schizophrenia. He's no longer with us, but he was admitted a few times. So some of my early connections with those places were visiting him, and then I ended up working in them. So that informed the whole collection of songs, really. And we've got songs about the hospital closing, inspirational people that work there, devious drug dealers that work there, which is quite a comedic song called Jelly Water. People who want to go back there because they feel safe there. Some of the injustices and nasty practices that happen there. So there's lots of things going on connected to the place, to Silver Meadows, I called it. Yeah. A kind of concoction of lots of different experiences, not just one hospital I worked in, because some experiences are quite a few, because I've been knocking around a bit.
So, I mean, it sounds a very optimistic concept to put all that together into an album, but it doesn't stop there, because I've seen something that it's in development as a musical stage play. So has that got any further?
Well, the initial bid was for too much. I think we had too many people in the cast. The songs have been adapted by a Liverpool writer called Ian Salmon. We've both been working. Ian's sort of pretty much run now with the script, but we've been developing some narrative stories that interconnect the songs, which is actually quite hard to do. Much harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought, oh yeah, this feels like a stage musical. I'll just bang one out, and it didn't quite happen. As I got so overloaded writing the album, I was really glad to hook up with Ian, who's like an old friend from Liverpool, and so we applied for funding, but now we've changed the numbers of actors that will be doing it, and it seems a little more realistic. We did put it on at Liverpool University for a couple of shows in the middle of last year, but we kind of abandoned it to rethink about how we do it. So it's like an ongoing possibility in progress, but it depends very much on somebody liking the script and the concept.
So we may hear of this again in the future.
Well, hopefully, but I mean, I am hopeful. I'm more hopeful than I was this time last year. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. But it'll be, I know there's an opportunity, and we're looking at dates in the end of September, early October in Liverpool to try it again with some drama students and some youth groups, I think, from the Everyman.
Right, okay. That sounds fascinating. You should get yourself to Salford. I know you've lived there for a while.
Oh, yeah. Salford is exactly where I lived. I lived in Walkden, which is actually in Salford, yeah.
Yeah, and I know from personal experience that their drama section is very very well renowned.
Yeah, Salford Uni.
Yeah.
I don't really. I mean, I played at Salford Uni, but my bass player teaches bass at Salford Uni.
Oh, right, interesting. Well, you've produced a total of 12 albums, according to my records, and you may contradict that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I mean, whether you count EPs and things. Yeah, I'll take 12. 12 sounds.
It used to be so straightforward, didn't it?
Yeah.
So we'll take it as 12 albums, one of which we've got a couple of tracks from. So the first one we're going to play is called A Girl from Bromsgrove Town, from the album Return of the Native. So is there a story behind that?
Well, the story is fairly obvious from the lyrics. It's about falling in love with someone who doesn't, and discovering that their sexuality lies elsewhere. That sounded very serious, but
it did. I think we should probably go straight into it. So this is Vinny Peculiar and A Girl from Bromsgrove Town.
I loved you, girl, from Bromsgrove Town. Still think about her now. And all the times passed between us, the life we've had and how. I never really told her then that she truly was the one. But no soon as I'd realized, she was gone. After college she was gone. Well, I stayed with her at weekends, and we fooled around all night. Something deep inside me told me things were not quite right. So I turned up to surprise her. The first thing that I saw was a holding hands and kissing with the girl next door. She was kissing the girl next door. Well, I never said much about it. I tried hard to pretend. We started going out, yeah, but just the three of us. She had no idea I knew then. But I confronted her and she confessed. She found a different path. She was kinda sorry, but there was no going back. There was no going back. perhaps I'll just take a walk in the park. We used to do that. I don't want to rush anything, not me, 'cause I loved a girl from Bromsgrove Town. Still think about her now. And all the time that's passed between us, the lives we've had and had.
Expat Digital Radio, online 24/7.
Hello, this is Mike Madden on the Art Show on Expat Radio, and you've just been listening to Vinny Peculiar and a Girl from Bromsgrove Town. Before I go any further, my station manager has said I must mention our new website, www.expatradio.uk. So visit that and you'll find out all about what's on next week. So Vinny, welcome back.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah, thanks for playing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, that's what we're here for. So let's crack on with your musical career and your band. Very interesting that you've had quite a few definitely household names playing your bands. How do you sort of put them together and how do you manage the fluidity in the band with people coming and going?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm thinking about it. I've had a few different bands, and sometimes people want to talk to me about the bands I've had that have included well-known people. When I was in Liverpool, I had a Liverpool band, and I moved to Manchester, and I met Mike Joyce, I think, first from the Smiths, and then Andy Rourke, and they came to see me performing live and asked if I needed a rhythm section. So I kind of wasn't going to turn that down. So they ended up joining the band, and that was probably 2005 to 2007. Andy left after about 18 months, but Mike stayed together with Craig Gannon, who was the second guitar player in the Smiths. He's actually from Salford as well. We did an album called The Fall and Rise of Vinny Peculiar, which came out, I think, in 2006. It did okay-ish, but it didn't dent the commercial charts or sell enough to subsidise the living costs of a grown-up rock and roll band, which is usually quite hard to do from record sales. But yeah, so Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce and Craig Gannon were all part of Vinny Peculiar for about Andy for 18 months and Mike and Craig for about 3 years. During that time, Bonehead from Oasis managed us at maybe 2009, and I got to know Bone quite well, and we always said we'd make a record, and we made another record. I made a record with Bonehead in a band we started in 2012 called Pile of Flames, and we did a lot of festivals and some European shows as Pile of Flames. But that lasted one album on Cherry Red Records, which is still available from the Vinny Peculiar website. There's a little plug. As are most of the Vinny Peculiar albums. Well, not all of them, because some of them have sold out and I've not got around to repressing them. But there's a website store with that kind of thing. I just mentioned that because Cherry Red just sent me a load of albums that they had in their store.
So this is kind of the life of the independent musician, that you're constantly putting a band together, doing shows, making records, but it's all down to yourself. There's no.
Well, yeah, I mean the band's album that I'm just finishing off now, I'm really dead excited about. It's kind of a noisy, harder rock edge to it, and I'm finishing off in the Midlands, which is of course the home of rock, the home of hard rock. I'm finishing the recording of it in Pershore with a great engineer-producer called Dave Draper, who's worked with a lot of bands in the Midlands and certainly knows his rock and roll. You talk to people down here, they've never even heard of the Smiths, never mind having an opinion on them. I found it incredibly polarised, the sense of different kinds of bands being revered in different kinds of areas. Down here it has its own musical identity. So I was saying to him, I want to do this album like it's a Midlands rock. I want it to be harder than. I don't want it to be necessarily perceived as a singer-songwriter album, although I have written the songs for it. So I've got the band that are playing on this new album are the lads from Parlour Flames, Shay Beresford on drums, and he's currently on tour with Black Grape, so he's permanently exhausted because they drive forever. The bass player is a guy called Ollie Collins, and Ollie played with various Doves offshoot bands in Manchester, and he also plays in a band called Nearly Dan, so that's quite taxing. I don't know if you know, it's a Steely Dan tribute band, so he's kept on his toes because you need to know what you're doing if you're playing Steely Dan songs. So I think he's in Scotland on tour with them at the moment, and I'm in the Midlands just finishing it off.
So you're just waiting. Have they still got to all come back together to contribute to that, or have they done their bits?
No, they've done their bits. I mean, the joy of the other member is a guy called Rob Stedman, who's a great keyboards player who's also in Parlour Flames. He's a Scot living in Manchester. Yeah, but so it's possible now for people to send. You know, we can send each other files, and musicians do that.
Yeah.
So Ollie will fix a bass part at his house. We go into a studio to record the drums and bass. Get that net, obviously I'll send them the demos, and we do a quick rehearsal, studio, drums, bass. This is the way it tends to work. And then that comes back to me in my studio, and then changes to the parts or ideas are then sent over the internet. So I haven't actually seen them physically for a while.
Right.
But the last 3 months I've been putting it together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I guess the whole process of not only putting it together, but also selling the records is different from, well, certainly from when I grew up, when you used to go to the shop and buy a 45 or a 33.
Yeah, I mean, we're just, I think we've got a name for it, but we're going to make an announcement on social media soon when the album's done, do a load of pictures. Then we'll have to do the videos, and then depending on how long you need all your promotional eggs in the basket before you have a little push, and then you've got to do a lot of social media. That's what people have to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's driven by social media these days.
I mean, I did have a physical distribution deal through Cherry Red Records, but I don't have that now. But I did an album through Cherry Red, who are quite a big independent label. Biggest independent label in the country. A couple of years ago, they did a compilation. 3 or 4 years ago, a compilation album of mine called The Root Mull Effect. Yeah, the subsequent releases after that have just been my own endeavours, really.
I did. You mentioned your website, and we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But I did see something on there which says you also run musical workshops where you get aspiring musicians together to write songs, play the songs, all done in the space of a day. That sounds like an incredible thing to do.
Well, yeah, you've definitely looked at the website then, Mike. That's cool. They started out as sort of a combination between mental health, which was the kind of area I used to work up when I had a job in the NHS when I was post-nursing, running courses. But I do a lot of the workshops through a charity that I'm a trustee of called Tonic Music for Mental Health. And they're based in Portsmouth, and I met the founder of the charity at a Parlour Flames gig at the Joiners in Southampton, I think in maybe 2012. And just got involved really with doing these workshops, which are about building people's creativity and confidence through music. There's also an element of talking about, how people perceive their diagnosis or feel about their mental health. But mostly it's just about bringing ideas, words and songs and putting them together and putting on a gig and having a go through a real PA in a real club. And it's often done through the mental health youth system. So they're quite young people who have been referred into the mental health. They have an alert around their mental health, and they have an opportunity to come on a course, and it's very informal. But yes, it can be fun. I mean, they last all day, which can be quite tiring, but kind of rewarding.
Yeah, So you must send us the details of that after the show, because we do have a charity page on the website now, expatradio.uk, and we are more than happy to host information about charities on there and give it a bit of a plug. Now, back to very much the present, and on next week's show, we've got Reckless Eric, and of course, you're about to go on tour with Eric. So how did you first get involved with him? Because it's not your first encounter with him.
I think I've done maybe 2 or 3 shows with Eric so far. The first was in Manchester in Gulliver's, and it was great. And I met him beforehand, and obviously I'm old enough to remember how cool Reckless Eric was on that Stiff Records compilation release. I think it was Larry Wallace and Ian Drury and Elvis Costello and probably Nick Lowe and a couple of other suspects. And I think it was called a Stiff Sampler 12-inch vinyl record in, I'm guessing, 1978.
It was either 77 or 78. I remember it well.
Yeah, of course you'll remember it too. But so I got talking to him about that, and he saw me do my show, and we both got talking about effects pedals. And before you know it, I do another show with him down here in Worcester, and it went really well. And I didn't really hear anything until recently, until he said. His manager got in touch with me and said, did I want to do shows on the tour? And I said, yeah, I'm happy to do them. But I couldn't do them all because I was tied up. And also Brighton is a very long way. Having said that, I'm going to Edinburgh and Glasgow as well. So
right.
And in the world of the independent musician, you have to work out what's just about doable and what's really just not doable.
Well, I thought it was quite a grueling tour, and he said it's nothing compared to America. But of course, you've got Leeds, Liverpool, and Manchester in 3 consecutive nights, so that'll be quite fun. Yeah,
no, that'll be great, and that's the straightforward part for me, because I know a lot of people up there, so I don't have any problems with where we stay, and that'll be a lot of fun. And it gets a bit more tricky if it's a one-off in a destination a long way away, because what I tend to do is aim to book another gig on the way back, just to make it all kind of work.
It's quite important to get that out there, because people just think, well, these rock and roll stars, they just rock up and play, and then it's all.
You kind of have to make it work for you.
Yeah. So you've played with some great musicians, you've toured with some great musicians. So if I ask you this question now,
sure.
Out of all the people that you've sort of not necessarily encountered but heard, listened to, which musician do you admire the most?
Well, I love, who do I love? I love Bowie, probably as much as I love anybody else. That was a massive thing for me throughout the whole 70s, that crop of albums from The Man Who Sold the World right through to Lodger. I think it's an incredible body of work. I know people knock David Bowie for being a plagiarist, but gosh, he was just ahead of the cool curve. I mean, he seemed to be less plagiaristic and more innovative to me, certainly through those times. And I love Bowie. From a singer-songwriter point of view, Joni Mitchell, I'm a huge fan of. Bob Dylan, I'm a huge fan of. I mean, they're the kind of obvious ones. And I like a few quirky English oddballs. I love John Cooper Clarke, especially. And I love Luke Haynes of the Auteurs. Luke Haynes, I think, is a brilliant songwriter. The Auteurs were certainly my favourite 90s band. I liked bands like Pope as well. It's funny because before we spoke earlier, I was watching a Pulp documentary on the TV and just reminded myself. It was really good. It was all about Sheffield life, and it was really well put together and not flashy. Later on, I could give you more. I mean, in the old days, I love T-Rex and all the early glam stuff.
Well, it was T-Rex that kind of sheltered me away from Bowie, if you like, in his early days, because I was T-Rex and nothing else, really.
Yeah, and I think when you're that young and at that age, it's like all or nothing, isn't it?
Yeah,
you have one band and everything else is rubbish.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a bit like that with Bowie. But from a folky point of view, I suppose I should mention about Simon and Garfunkel probably at the time were a massive, so on my stuff, that's the reason you'll hear acoustic guitars being fingerpicked is probably Paul Simon getting obsessed with all that.
Well, we're running short of time now, so in the minute or so we've got left, just tell our listeners where they can find a little bit more about Vinny Peculiar.
Well, I'm on the usual social media platforms, and I'm always happy to talk to people through Twitter, Facebook, and even Instagram recently. Eric loves Instagram, by the way. He was telling me.
I'm not on Instagram. I must get myself around to getting on there.
You're saying that's the best one, which is, and I joined not long after that conversation a couple of years ago. But well, and there's a website, vinnypeculiar.com, and I do a diary thing there and talk about the next gigs and where recording's up to. And there's a store or a shop, as we Brits like to call them, but everyone calls them stores now because we're
yeah,
been Americanized. Yeah, that's pretty much the usual way of getting in touch. I mean, if anyone's interested, I've been doing 2-for-1 CD deals on the website.
Brilliant. So
I'm almost sounding like I've got commercial now.
So, well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and this technology seems. I mean, my red button still says red. So I hope yours do.
I'm so glad it does, because this recording would have cut off if it didn't.
Great. Okay, man.
So we're going to play out now with another of your songs from the same album, The Return of the Native. So thank you very much. You've been listening to Mike Madden on the Art Show on Expat Radio, and this is Vinny Peculiar and Golden City.
So how long do you plan to stay? Are you coming back to me one day? I know I've been a long time gone, but this is where I feel stronger. As the Golden City waits in vain, like a tired raver on a late-night train, coming down again. I took some pills that didn't work, took some more and I felt worse. When it was time to say goodbye, I felt like I was going to die. But the Golden City welcomed me like a hippie girl in a French movie, running wild and free. Golden City, don't let me down. Golden City, I need you around. Should I fall down again? Well, we almost made it through the night, somehow made it all alright. We did everything that could be done, yet still I ruined all the fun. And the Golden City knows it all, checks the parachute and breaks the fall, stands up proud and tall. Golden City, shining for you. Golden City, my love remains true. But this is what I have to do.
You're listening to Expat Radio, beaming out across France and around the world.
You've been listening to the Arts Show podcast with Mike Madden. Come back soon for more artists, authors, musicians and anyone else connected with the arts. We're going to play out with Mike Sanchez and I Don't Stand a Chance.
Baby, you hiding something that you don't want me to know, because I'm getting a vibe from way down the side, like you're just about ready to go. And you can't tell me where you stayed last night, you just can't cope with treating me right. I'm on the road to heartbreak, now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more, I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand stand a chance. You don't wanna know when I can't make you dance. Well, I said goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance. Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be here. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. No, I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna